All right. I think we're live here. Daddy's not here for us, so the kids are running the show. But I believe this is episode 237, where we are going to be talking 99% about the game against Marseille on Thursday and a brief nod to whatever you can call the game against Arsenal a few moments ago. Robin, Craig, how are we doing?
Yeah, good. I'm zen about the whole thing.
Yeah, good this side.
Very adult of you.
Yeah.
Very adult of me. Unusually adult of me, but there you go.
It's obviously been a fairly busy week here. All eyes were on the game on Thursday, and Robin, you were there in the North Stand in your season ticket seat, witnessing what I think you probably described to us as one of the best moments as a Brighton fan.
Oh yeah, 100%. We can go into that in boring levels of detail.
Well, we will, but I think we're going to start, unfortunately, for a brief nod to this Arsenal performance that just happened, because we want to spend time actually talking about the good stuff. So we'll get this out of the way. This was a bit of a hangover game, wasn't it? And we came in with very, very low expectations. There was a number of sort of rotations that De Zerbi made in terms of bringing in Ferguson. João Pedro dropped out. We moved things around at the back a little bit where Hinchelwood played against Marseille. He got a bit of a rest. Igor was dropped. And we brought in Veltman and a few others. What was your thoughts on this with the kind of moves around from Thursday? Kind of a needs must, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Hinchelwood, when he came off on Thursday, looked knackered. I think he only played, 65, 70 minutes probably. He just looked knackered, so I wasn't surprised by that. Igor ran himself into the ground on Thursday, so again, I wasn't hugely surprised by that. Obviously, João Pedro, again, ran himself into the ground and had the kind of the emotional, baggage of what happened at the end. So I think they're all pretty logical changes. I thought he might have brought in Belieber for a bit of energy in the middle and generally just to try and, be a bit of a nuisance, but I had no qualms with the selection, really.
Like, my only inevitable qualm is James Milner at left back against Saka.
How dare you?
I know.
Yeah, how dare you? I'm fully on board with James Milner now. I've had a total conversion on him.
I don't know. It's a weird one for me. I think just you're up against someone who's very explosive and very direct. We saw it happen in the first half. We'll get onto that, but I don't want to continue this journey towards a James Milner just like hate speech or whatever you want to call it. But it just seemed like a complete mismatch on paper, and it unfolded in real life as well. So you could sort of see it coming. I don't begrudge the rotation at all. It's just I think Igor would have been better at that place, and you saw that in the last 30.
I was surprised as you were, Robin, in that I felt like you're playing away to Arsenal after a European game and you've got no metal in the middle of the pitch. Like Gross and Gilmore, as we know, and we'll talk. I know we're going to talk about Gilmore in much more detail, my favourite subject at the moment, based on this game on Thursday. But you know what he does, and when you're facing that Arsenal team away from home, you want someone that's a bit better, a bit stronger, can really break up the play there. And we certainly missed that. But let's face it, the game was fundamentally a bit of a write-off in and of itself. Lack of energy, didn't really come out the blocks at all. Weathered a storm at the start, couldn't get out as much as we tried. It felt like Matoma and Ndingra basically could have just sat on the bench for most of the game, and it wouldn't have made any difference. Ferguson was being shadowed by about 4 Arsenal defenders, and outside of that, it was torrid for us. They just passed the ball out to Saka and Martinelli, and the rest is history. The fact that we ended up sort of conceding via a corner was, it's Brighton. We may as well do it that way. And outside of a gross opportunity towards the end where we could have snatched something from this game, we didn't deserve anything from this, did we?
No, we didn't. And, I think the fact that it wasn't 5-0 is almost solely down to Lewis Dunk at various points in the game. Yeah. Just having an absolutely monstrous game. Slightly frustrating that he saves a really good game for one where it's kind of in vain. I'd rather he kept that in the locker for... Sort
of a Neymar move, that is. He's made a career out of that.
But I thought Bart made a couple of good saves. He was obviously slightly undone by Van Hecke, just giving a glorious assist to Gabriel Jesus. But it just seems fairly fundamental that you just wouldn't leave an opposition striker unmarked at the far post for a corner. Like that just seems, there's different, you can argue about how you defend a corner, whether you go man to man or whether you go zonal, but I think any of those methods wouldn't involve leaving a free striker at the far post. So that's obviously disappointing. But, if they hadn't scored from that, I don't think it's necessarily a game-changing moment. It's just nice to remind ourselves that we're still shit at defending corners. It's just like it's a sort of comfort blanket we can hold on to, isn't it?
It's perpetual, isn't it?
It's nice.
It's constant. But yeah, at least we've got some consistency there. But yeah, I mean, it could have been 4 or 5. It wasn't exactly the most fun of watching, was it?
No,
so
just move on.
Yeah.
Do I dare bring up the keeper rotation piece again, given that it was a communication error between Verbruggen and Van Hecke. Two people talked about
weird.
They should have a good link with one another.
Weird, isn't it? That's really odd.
But I'm worried a little bit, and hopefully this just gets worked on. He's young, obviously. Verbruggen's command of his area when it comes to set pieces is weak. Now, as we saw from this game as well, on the positive side, shot stopping is fantastic. There was who was it that tried to ping it in the top corner? Was it Havertz or it was someone?
Yeah.
Odegaard. It was Odegaard.
Yeah.
Yeah, he cut in and pinged it in the corner, and Verbruggen was straight to it. But command from an area when he's got a defender pushed up on him in a set piece, he doesn't seem to get out properly and really maintain control.
Blocked him.
They did block him.
Was it Saliba?
Saliba, but that happens in every Premier League game. That's
just
standard nowadays.
Just needs someone else. I'm surprised someone else, if it's not for Verbruggen, someone else needs to be in there shoving him out.
That's what you need Igor in for. He should have come on earlier, get heavy in.
Yeah, just to basically bounce him out.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that I had quite a long chat with someone in the ground on Thursday about the whole Steele versus Verbruggen conundrum. And what everyone agreed on a couple of things. One, that if you combine the two together, you'd have an unbelievable goalkeeper. Like, they've both just got attributes that you'd want in the other one. The other point is that it's often, he seems to put Verbruggen in for games where we're going to be under pressure and we're going to be on the end of more shots, because I guess he sees him as a better shot stopper. And he puts Steele in for his distribution in games where we're going to be on the front foot and we need to keep it up. So I think I can totally understand, as frustrating as it is, I can understand De Zerbi's strategy behind it. He would probably rather, obviously, have a goalkeeper that could do both scenarios. But, it is what it is.
Verbruggen will get there probably in a year or two, but for now, it's all right, isn't it, Craig?
One of those, yeah.
I was about to say he's got it right, and you can see, and he's what, 21 years old, right? That's ridiculous. So he's got a couple of years, and just with the nurturing and learning of Jason Steele and vice versa, right? Like you said, you're spot on. Like they all have they both have attributes the other probably desires, right? So you give them a year or two to work together, and you've got an outstanding goalkeeper and an amazing backup one.
It's just a shame that we tend to put Bart in games where he's just going to get an absolute hiding.
We started the season like that, didn't we? Like every time he was put in against like superior opposition, you just felt poor guy.
And also, the pressure's off for him, right? It's like you are going to get peppered here, so like just play how you want to play. Jason Steele's used to it, right? Like knocking it around the back and stuff like that. Like he's a little bit more assured on the ball. But for Bruggen, it's like, okay, you're going to get peppered. You're just going to do your best here, right? There's no judgment here. And just letting him adapt in that way is probably for the best. So he'll get there. Like you said, he's going to be 23, 24, and he's going to hit it, and he's just going to become it. And he's the number one for Netherlands for a reason. He's going to be our number one for a reason. There's a reason why everyone wanted him. So we'll just see it. You just have to give him time.
Yeah.
Let's sack the rest of this off. I don't want to remember this game. Nothing came of it that was particularly redeeming or thoughtful.
Pascal Gross almost scoring the most undeserved equaliser of all time. Wouldn't have been fair. I mean, would have actually felt bad for Arsenal had that gone.
I would have laughed incredibly hard. But it's
unusual from him as well. Like,
Yeah,
it's the sort
yeah.
of chances that he normally puts away without really even either thinking about it or looking at the goal.
I was going to say that, like, you want anyone on the end of that, and it is
Yeah.
probably Pascal Gross. So that tells you it really wasn't our day.
No.
Yeah, 26 shots for Arsenal. We had 1 shot on target. So a miracle that we somehow had 50% possession. We were talking before we went live about this. Felt like we had 5% possession in that game.
Yeah, dude.
Let's add one more thing on this because we have to talk about it, and then we're going to move on to all the positives because there have been a massive amount of positives over the last few days. We saw Voltman go off, tried to come back on after an injury, taking a knock, and then pulled up, and Hinshelwood comes on. Do we have a fullback that can play football?
No.
Yeah. So that's questionable, isn't it?
It is. I would say, I said to you off air, like, the only good thing about it is that it will now take a certifiably insane person in the club to not buy a fullback in January, or at least loan a fullback in January. Like, you will just look legitimately insane if we get to the end of the window.
Early hours on the first type.
Yeah, like, just needs to be done.
It has to be.
Like a Football Manager one where it's already locked in as soon as the window opens. But no, it's obviously, it's sad for Veltman, who's obviously had a couple of difficult weeks off the pitch, it seems, to come back in a game where you kind of just want to almost take your medicine without any unintended consequences of it. And it just seemed like one of those innocuous ones where he's obviously tried to win the ball and his knees just either locked or, it just looks like a very painful one. So inevitably he'll be out for about 3 years. So
yeah, no, that's it. Career ender. He'll probably be fine. But let's move on to the positives. I'm sick of this game. We did get one today in that Danny Welbeck came on for the last 10 or so minutes. Thank God, like, just another body. But Danny Welbeck's experience, his maturity in these games, his quality when he's involved gives us another bit of an option. I don't mean to be mean to the guy, but I'm glad that we now have Welbeck to come in to play in those front positions instead of having to rely on Buonanotte, who still isn't showing really what we need from him for the most part, which is wonderful. Second big positive this week, outside of the game on Thursday, Van Hecker signed a contract. This came out of the blue for me. Did anyone else see this coming?
I had been thinking about it because he signed a really weird extension in the summer, where it wasn't really disclosed how long he'd signed. Some people said a year, some people said 2 years. And obviously, he has just come on leaps and bounds. So I think it's one of those that it's very nice. I didn't necessarily I thought it would be one that would be done in that standard March, April, latter end of the season style slew of renews, but very good. He is going to be he is the natural successor to Dunk, isn't he?
Well, he's been excellent.
He has. He's been amazing. I mean, you can see that he's obviously learning off Dunk, because today he put in a textbook Lewis Dunk throw your body in the way block that was all, was just exactly what Dunk does. So he is, I did say before Dunk's performance today that I thought Van Hecker had been, our best centre half of the season. I still probably think on balance he has, even considering Dunk's performance today. So yeah, to get whatever 3.5 more years is fantastic.
It's weird, isn't it, how good he is? I think we always say this. I'll make it quick, but yeah, he's only just signed an extension. He's quite clearly become a main focal point in that defense as well. You just imagine saying that 8-9 months ago at this point, right? It's funny how football works.
I think we were all pretty doubtful about him even in pre-season. I
was about to send him on loan to Genoa. He could head off with Ostergaard for a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose that shows you, I don't know whether they did it on purpose in terms of they're obviously right, we don't want to let him go in the summer, but also we're not quite sure whether we want to commit to a long-term deal. So they obviously gave him something in between to go, okay, ball's in your court now, mate. What are you going to do? And he's obviously come out and gone, well, I'm going to turn into one of the best young defenders in Europe. Thanks very much. So, it works out for all parties, doesn't it?
It does. Talking of working out for all parties and a party in and of itself, let's move on to the main event here on Thursday. And maybe we'll just set the scene, even though it doesn't need to be set. We go into this game. There's a lot on the line. We're a point behind Marseille. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm trying to use my memory, which is always questionable. We need a win to go through top of this group. Anything else, and it's Marseille. There's a little bit of comfort knowing that you've qualified regardless, but coming first in the group in the Europa League, for those that don't know or haven't remembered, is a big, big thing, because you get to get out of an additional game and you're going through straight to that round of 16. Because Marseille have got to play. Do we know who they're playing yet?
No, the draw's on Monday.
Draws on Monday. We don't play a game now again in the Europa League for months.
Till 7th of March.
And that was all on the line going into Thursday night. Big, 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 big game. We know what happened against Marseille before. We know what happened at the Amex before on the opening game of the Europa League against Athens. This was massive. Robin, what was the atmosphere like? You were there.
It was great. I'm going to add one other benefit before I go on to it, which is I believe, and someone in the comments will probably correct me if I'm wrong, we also get seeded in the draw for last 16, and it means also you get your home leg second, which is another big advantage to throw in there as well. Yeah, I mean, it was, the atmosphere was exactly as you'd expect, because it's very bizarre that you go into a game like this where a loss isn't the end of the world, and it's kind of a bonus, you know, if you get the win. And yet, if you flip to the end of the game, you'd have thought that it was, you know, the most important, you know, most important game we've ever played, with, you know, basically everything on the line. Yeah, it was good. You know, Marseille fans were having been to the away game. You know, some of their ultras travelled over, but it's standard Amex acoustics. In that, to be honest, at the back of the North Stand, I couldn't really hear them. I could see that they were jumping up and down. I could see the flares, but I couldn't really get much of an atmosphere from them. But it was one of the few occasions at the Amex, very similar to that Chelsea game when Potter came back, where everybody seemed to be up for it from the beginning. And there was this thought that, okay, we're really going to go for it. I know Duncan and De Zerbi had both talked about the crowd needing to be really up for it. And kind of everybody was. And yeah, it was very, very unusual to see the Amex quite like that, like a European ground, not the Amex that we're kind of used to.
And it was, and I know you obviously, we can't fix the acoustics of the stadium itself, but that atmosphere, everyone was talking about how incredible it was. It just felt different from normal.
It's mad to see, you know, to see the same thing you see at Marseille, which is one guy, you know, with a megaphone not watching the game. You know, to see that at the Amex, and you know, I didn't realize. So obviously they were holding up banners at the front. I thought they were actually draped over something, but no, the general at the front with the megaphone was basically making sure that these people held this banner up for effectively 2.5 hours, which is a pretty good effort from that perspective. Very well policed. I mean, more police than I've seen for any of the other games, but didn't see a huge amount of disorder beyond a few seats being ripped out in the away end. I saw a few YouTube videos with people, Marseille fans, holding seats above their head, which is just it's kind of a bit weird.
Disgraceful.
But yeah, it was an atmosphere where, and you know, the standard thing, which is that it did drop off a bit when the frustration started. You know, it was looking like one of those standard games where we were playing really well, we were creating loads of chances, and we were doing absolutely everything other than putting the ball in the back of the net, and you know, nearly conceding a couple of, you know, real examples from our back catalogue. I mean, we nearly had a Burnley 2.0, didn't we? Where the world stopped for about 2 seconds, Steele had given up on it, and everyone just went, "Oh, for fuck's sake!"
I asked you if you'd messed yourself in the stadium when that happened.
Yeah, I did. It was
right in front of you, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, I'll be honest. It was one of those ones where I was 99%.
Let's describe it for those that don't remember what we're talking about here.
So it was a shot from
Klaus, I think.
Yeah, from Klaus, from what would have been, as I'm looking at it, the front left of the penalty area, deflects off. I'm not sure who it deflects off, potentially Van Hecke. And it's so similar to that Burnley one, which it loops. And you just think the way that this works is that this is going to land in the only place, like a postage stamp, top corner. Like, Steele is watching it. He's fully given up. He's just given this is in the lap of the gods, basically, at this point. And obviously, you know, it comes crashing off the bar, and everyone just thinks, like, that would have been the standard way of doing it. And then we nearly had a throwback to David Stockdale with a shot coming off the post in the second half, hitting Jason Steele's back, and then nearly going. And I think Van Hecker managed to kind of hack it clear. So there was a lot of nervousness because it was everything in there was all of the ingredients that we're so used to, which is dominating games, not quite getting what we need in attack, and then conceding really frustrating, unlucky goals. So the atmosphere did kind of dip a little bit, and we started to look very leggy. I don't know if it came across on the TV, but from kind of 65 minutes on, for about 15 or 20 minutes, Marseille were really on the front foot, and we just looked like we poured everything.
It was a frustrating game, and I'm gonna play the Josh role here and get us back on chronological track. Well, let's go back to the start before we get into the sort of tail end, because we know how that piece ends. But it was a weird one. Craig, where were you watching it? Not quite maybe as glamorous as the North.
Yeah, in my front room. So but I was just watching it on telly. Obviously, it's just like, I think it's smack bang in the middle of our day as well. So you kind of have to sneak away and maybe just keep one eye on everything else. But yeah, I think from a TV perspective, obviously it felt like a big deal. They really upped it, and yeah, it was different, right? I think it came across on TV and on sort of the highlights as well, just how important it was that the crowd got involved. And obviously we get firsthand sort of recollection as well. But yeah, on the TV it looked different too, right? And you've got the smoke, you've got the fog, you've got all of this stuff. It felt like a European game. It was quite exciting at the start, right? You're like, oh, this is bigger than it probably should be or probably needs to be. Oh, that's how I felt.
I felt too.
It's like we're already through. This feels like a little bit of a free hit, but I would like to win it if we can. But otherwise, no dramas if we don't. Right? It was sort of one of those things where there was a safety net. But then as soon as it started, you're like, let's get into them, right? Because it suddenly it just completely flipped on me, and I was like, okay, we need to go and win this now.
I had a slightly different experience from both of you in that I was in a bar in New York City watching this game, and I didn't realize it's a bar I go to, on occasion when I'm in New York, and it's run by an Irish guy. They've got a classic American thing. It's about 400 TVs in this place, but I didn't realize it's the regular home of the New York-based Marseille supporters group. So I go in there and there's no seats left by the time I've got to this place. There's a bunch of these tables that were empty, but had like reservation stuff on them. Anyway, I got seated on one of them, and on all these tables, which should have seated about 20, 30 people, it says reserved Marseille supporters group for the Marseille Brighton game. I'm like, if they just lobbed me, because I'm in the Brighton shirt, if they just lobbed me in the center of some maniacal Frenchman. Turns out a couple of Marseille fans did show up, but it seems like the Marseille supporters group in New York bailed on it, which for me, it's very rare for the French to surrender before anything's really got into it. But it was remarkable to be in a situation where that could have been fairly. I was told by the guy that runs it, he's like, just be chill, and we got the Marseille fans get a bit rowdy. So that was a weird one. Let's talk about lineups, because this was interesting in the sense that we were playing what seemed to be, and we'll talk about formations because it was different with the ball and without the ball in this game. It seemed to be Hinchelwood at left back, Van Hecker and Dunk at centre back, obviously Steele in goal. We had Igor in there as well. So it was a confusing positioning of that. You could argue Hinchelwood right back, Igor left back, Gross, Gilmore, Adingra, Buonanotte, João Pedro, and Matoma. What did we think of that, and what were your expectations when you saw that? Were you thinking back three or back four when you saw that lineup?
I was thinking back three purely based on trying to fit people into jigsaw puzzle pieces. But like you say, it seemed to be very fluid. And Igor seemed very comfortable, effectively filling in at left back when needed. So I thought
this was the first time I feel like we've actually seen, even if it was for a brief moment in time, Igor actually be at left back.
Yeah.
It wasn't for the whole game, obviously, but for portions.
And he was quick. It's the first time I've seen him. Like, he is. I don't know what expectations I had, but I was taken aback by how quick he was.
Yeah, a unit, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Like just the size of him as well, like the speed he can get up to and the size that he is. It's scary.
And he just, he plays
Becoming a fan favorite, isn't he?
Yeah, he plays. Do you know, it's the only the closest comparison I can draw with it, weirdly, is kind of Dan Burn, which is this someone who basically plays left back as a centre back in exactly the way that you think they're going to do, which is they throw their body around like a centre half when they're playing out wide, and it just seems to work.
Yeah, and I feel good on Dan Burn for moving over to a club where he can really go deep in a European competition. That's obviously been fantastic for him. So all the best to him. We obviously facing this Marseille side. From what I saw, at least when the game was starting, it seemed to me that we were in a back three when we had the ball, and we were building up possession. And you had Van Hecke, Igor, and Dunk slot in there, and then the guys on the wing backs then moved around a little bit and pushed high up. When we lost the ball and we had to defend a little bit, we moved more to that back four and Igor slotted into that left back. So as we say, very fluid. The fact that the players can drift in and out of these different formations fairly comfortably when the lineup changes every single game is rather impressive. For the most part, outside of that, the oh shit moment with Klaus pumping the shot and it nearly going in, first half was fairly, can we just break them down and make something happen? What was it like there, Robin?
It was a bit frustrating because I was saying I said in the group chat at the time, every shot and every cross just wasn't hit with conviction. It seemed to dribble through to the keeper, basically. And we were getting ourselves into really good positions. And then just at the last minute, just doing our normal of kind of, fluffing our lines. But weirdly, it was quite bizarre. When we did actually score, which obviously we'll get onto, that was actually the only moment in the game where I thought, this isn't happening. Like the rest of the game, I was actually quite confident. I was like, Marseille cannot sit this deep and just take wave after wave of attack for the entire game. I just thought it's coming at some point, but we were just doing everything but hitting anything with conviction.
It was a very Brighton sort of stat line for the first half, Craig, in the sense that Marseille had 0.02 XG. We had 0.5 with almost 60% possession, 6 shots to their 1, and nothing to claim for it.
Presumably the 1 was the deflection, wasn't it? I guess.
Well, the 1 shot, yeah, I guess it, and it didn't count as on target because it hit the woodwork, right?
Yeah.
It's just, I think it was huffing and puffing with no result. I think, like Robin said, it was a few shots here and there, but nothing that really to write home about. So it just felt like one of those. For me, watching it, it was sort of like, it's one of those, right, where we're going to have the majority of the ball, we're going to make the chances, but we're not actually going to score. And the pressure was there, but Marseille sat deep and, to be fair, felt quite comfortable. So then it was more of a case of, if they're just going to allow us to have these tepid shots from outside the box, then I'm sure they'll take that all day. So it was more, okay, how do we tire these guys out, or how do we make them make a mistake? And the longer this goes on and the more pressure we do, surely they've got a crack at some point. So that was where I saw the second half coming in, was let's just keep going and keep the barrage up until they either become knackered or they make a mistake. And then it's just a gambling game, isn't it, really, there?
Not a lot happened, and I completely agree. Not a lot happened at half time in terms of switches or anything like that. Fairly unusual for us, right? I feel like De Zerbi does like to chip and change things around at half time normally, Robin.
I kind of felt like he saw like the rest of us and thought they're doing everything but the last bit. Like, logic tells you that if they keep doing this, we are going to get results. So I think he probably just, and no one really stuck out as. Dingra looked a little bit off it, but he was still getting in the right positions and just, still contributing. So there was no real urgency to change it, I don't think. If we'd have been really under the pump, then he may have done. But, again, not a huge number of natural options off the bench as well to go, certainly from an attacking point of view, there was no real obvious, you go, or maybe on another day, if, the sort of day that if someone else is fit, maybe he hooks a Dingra for, Ansu Fati or someone at half time if there's another option. But felt like, wasn't necessarily needing a change.
But we did further into that second half. I think you get to the point where you say, well, something's got to give here. As we know, there was a 0% chance of this game ending 0-0, based on everything that's happened this year so far. So Evan Ferguson comes in on the 64th minute, Adingra goes out, and then we wait another 10 minutes and we bring on really just two young, energetic, electric players into the fray in James Milner and Adam Lallana, sacrificing Hinshelwood and Buonanotte, basically taking out the youth and bringing on the experience, which I think says a lot for De Zerbi's mentality around why we have those players. What were you thinking when we need a goal? We know that we're probably open to being countered here. You're 74 minutes into a must-win game in many ways, and you go, Milner and Lallana, let's do this thing.
I understood Lallana because I know that he's got that ability to kind of stitch play together, lay off one-touch passes in impossible areas, and it's kind of that's textbook what you think Lallana's brought in to do. In games where you just need to unlock that final bit of the jigsaw, you bring him on. I'll be honest, I just thought if you're going to make a switch at fullback, I just thought with Veltman on the bench, I thought that would have been the more natural switch, would have been to bring him on instead of Milner. But maybe he's not trained, with having been out with the issues that he had, maybe, hasn't trained as much. But as I said a couple of minutes ago, we were starting to look really leggy. So we needed something. We needed an injection of something else.
Needed two OAPs, yeah.
That was it. But I mean, we'd passed up, a few chances. Matoma, when he burst down the left-hand side and just decided that he was going to cross it across the box, probably faster and harder than anyone's ever kicked a football, in human history. It was a great pass from Gross as well, I think, from memory, to crossfield pass to set him up. And then we had Adingra getting the ball in exactly the same position that he scored the second goal in Amsterdam from, almost, to the exact bit on the pitch, and, doing his best impression of a, Leonardo Ulloa penalty. So, yeah, and I think when those chances kind of came and went, it did seem like in the crowd and on the pitch, it did seem like everyone was just losing a little bit of spark and a little bit of belief, because you think the same pattern has continued, for the first half and up into the second half, and you just go, we're doing everything but score. So I think changes kind of we just needed the extra energy, whoever it was going to be. As it turned out, Milner and Lallana both introduced a huge amount of energy. Milner even more. I mean, he was getting up and down that touchline.
And I think that's why it's Milner, not Veltman, right?
Yeah.
Craig, you were going to say something.
Well,
yes.
no, it was spot on, right? Like, Milner and Lallana give you that energy. They give you that energy for 20 minutes, which is exactly what you needed at that point, right? So, and again, I don't have any particular gripe, right, with Lallana or Milner, but they cannot do 95, 100 minutes of football. So what you do, and the best way that you use James Milner, is you bring him on for 25, 30 minutes, and he is able to give you exactly what you need because of his energy, because of his fitness, and because of his just sheer knowledge of having 20 years in the Premier League, right? That's unteachable, right? So having him available, and I think it was the right thing, right? You're taking off two 18-year-olds and bringing on a 34 and a 38-year-old or something like that, right? But it was the right move. You need experience. Lallana ended up getting people riled up because he ended up pushing people around and stuff
Got
like
himself
that.
a little yellow card, didn't he?
Yeah,
He did get himself a sneak yellow.
Oh, surely by design, right? Try and rile these players up. Let's try and get this a little bit rowdy and get a bit more energy in there by any means necessary.
I think that was the point where the ref seemed to almost mimic. Do you remember that video that came out a long time ago that was
with a double yellow card?
Brazilian referee that strutted around the pitch and just gesticulated everywhere. This ref thought he was a star of the show on the 79th minute when he was just like, bam, bam. Chill out, mate. Like, he didn't even really do anything.
No, it was weird.
He was loving it.
But yeah, it was. And I think Ferguson, as much as when he came on, it didn't really change the pattern of play, especially. He wasn't getting a huge amount of touches. But I think the logic of that is that you know that Ferguson has it in him to conjure a goal from absolutely nowhere. So I totally understood that. Yeah, we just needed the extra legs. And yeah, it was just drifting towards, it was kind of drifting towards an inevitable where you go, this is either finishing 0-0 or we're going to have a standard, we're going to be hit on the counter-attack.
Yeah, it was one or the other. There was no other option. But that brings us to the 87th minute, almost on the dot, right? And this will be interesting because I really want to get to grips with the atmosphere, knowing that Craig and I couldn't possibly be there to feel it. But this is where you saw the value of specifically the Lallana edition, because what you got here was the ball comes to Billy Gilmour in this sort of quarterback-like position, halfway into the opposition half. You've got one Marseille player that's, further up the pitch than he is. So they've basically got 10 behind the ball at this point. And who better to have the ball at his feet than who is arguably, especially on Thursday, the best passer in the Brighton team, one could say. The ball then goes from Gilmour to Lallana, who puts a delightful touch over to Pascal Gross, who then immediately, this was all one touch, immediately then releases the ball out to João Pedro. And for those of you that have been watching Evan Ferguson lately and saying, you know what, is he quite as good as whatever everyone's been saying, so on and so forth, go watch a replay of this goal that we scored. He is 2 defenders from Marseille are on him, which is why João Pedro has space. Yeah. They're completely gathering up on Evan Ferguson. So even if you don't feel like he's getting touches, you don't feel like he's pinging the ball in the net, we scored that goal because 2 other players were marking him.
Yeah.
Ball comes to João Pedro. He basically dukes and cuts back out onto his right foot, slams the ball home. Everyone goes nuts. What was it like?
I was still annoyed that they hadn't given a corner for Evan Ferguson's shot for about a minute beforehand. And you just think in the ground, you could tell everyone thought João Pedro, when he turned the other way, everyone thought he's turned the wrong way. He's taken too many touches. There's a guy a couple of rows in front of me who actually just, when he turned the other way, just went, oh, for fuck's sake, set it up so nicely. And then, it's one of those ones where I didn't see it hit the back of the net. You just knew it was going to. And just, absolute bedlam. Like, in terms of Amex goal celebrations, there's, the closest two to that were either the McAllister penalty last season, but obviously that one's not as spontaneous because it's kind of, there's a fairly good chance it's going to be a goal, from the penalty spot. Or before that, probably Andone's one at home to Palace, where, to score from an impossible position. But genuinely one of those goal celebrations where you end up, I ended up a good couple of rows in front of where I started at the back of the North Stand. The guy next door to me, Ian, his glasses were just destroyed. Genuinely, like, he was just picking up 2 bits of metal and 1 lens that was still left.
Probably be hired by PGMOL next week.
Yeah, it was just the noise as well. Like, just I've never heard such just just an explosion of noise, and just everywhere you looked. Because normally when you get home goal celebrations, you get a few people going mad, and you get a few people kind of more politely applauding. This was genuinely the entire ground had lost its mind.
Oh, it's 88 minutes of pent up frustration.
Yeah, and especially as it's where you knew, because it had been such a standard, as we said, Albion performance. It's drifting towards 0-0. And and there's so much to unpack, I obviously didn't see all of this at the time, but you watch the video afterwards. There's so much to unpack in the celebration. João Pedro's into the crowd, and the video that someone's taken of him jumping into the crowd is phenomenal. De Zerbi's in the crowd. Billy Gilmour is so knackered that all he can do is just slap.
He just falls to his knees, doesn't he?
Celebration. Yeah. Jason Steele is basically giving it to the Marseille ultras at the other end. And a 60-year-old Albion fan in the North Stand lets off a flare. It's just like it's the most unlikely combination. And we should say he did chuck it onto the pitch, which then obviously got him arrested. So we can't condone that. But just the sheer, like, if it comes back to go, if that is a drug, if that feeling in that moment was a drug and you could market it, you'd be the richest man in the world, because there's just nothing like that. And it was just bonkers, and it went on for a good couple of minutes. Like when the game restarts, I think it's 90 minutes when it restarts.
De Zerbi's lost his mind at this point as well.
Yeah, De Zerbi's gone. He's in the crowd. João Pedro's in the crowd. And it's just, everyone has just gone absolutely nuts. There's some guys sitting near us, they're like kind of 18, 19-year-old kids, like 4 of them. They have got genuinely, it would look like they were bowling pins. Like they'd just gone, they just spread out, like they'd just gone absolutely everywhere. And it's just that the closest ever celebration anywhere in an Albion game I've been in was probably the Ulloa at Forest. To get the playoffs in stoppage time. But that was the only other one where everyone has lost their mind. And I was actually at breakfast the next day in my hotel, and I was sitting with a couple of Marseille fans, and we were chatting in general. And as an aside, they had just had nothing but good things to say about the city and the club and how they've been treated and all of that good stuff. But they said the only time that the ultras were quiet was obviously when the goal went in, and he just said it was obviously English not his first language, but it was such a brilliant way of describing it. He said even the ultras just stood and admired everyone simultaneously losing their mind and their shit. They were just like, what has happened? What has just happened? And it's that standard Albion thing that even then you just go, a part of you just goes, this is still finishing 1-1. After all of that, that you're conditioned to think that you go, as much as I've just enjoyed that, there is every chance that this goes wrong at the end. But it's almost as if, and I said this in our chat as well, there is a certain amount of revisionism and kind of hubris about it, but it's almost like, I can't imagine under Graham Potter the stadium going as mental as that. It's almost like the crowd have been injected with a little.
They'd asked him to sit down in class, probably.
Yeah, but it's that kind of, everyone's like De Zerbi's kind of charisma and his personality had kind of rubbed off on everyone, and everyone just went absolutely mad.
It has. It absolutely has. Craig, what was it like from Chicago a million miles away?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not even a patch on what it would have been to be there. I'm sure you agree. I would have paid a significant amount of money to have been there. But yeah, I think Robin's right. You're preconditioned to go, this is still going to go tits up, isn't it? Or something like that. And just be like, right, okay. Like Pedro just bouncing up and down in the crowd, and then they go and just score straight away. I was like,
whilst we're all still celebrating.
Yeah, that's incredibly Brighton of us to even try and do.
And De Zerbi felt that as well, right? Because we did make 2 subs on the 90th minute to bring in some Veltman and Belieber.
I guess Pedro had just been booked, for going in the crowd, so he gets hooked off.
I sort of hobbled off as well, to be fair.
Yeah, because claims it was an injury sub, but I think he's lost his mind, hasn't he?
But just in terms of the goal, it's perfectly constructed as well.
Was the noise did it sound louder than the Amex normally sounds? Because in the ground, it felt like it was decibels louder.
I think it definitely did for me. I think you touched on it as well. It was very elongated as well. It was sort of like you don't get that initial rush of yay, back to football. It was this very much 1.5 minutes of just, this is incredible, and it just kept going and going and going. And
the weird thing was also the bonus of, sorry to interrupt, it's the bonus of no, you didn't have to wait for a VAR check either. It was a proper old school, pre-VAR. No one even gave it a thought.
It was a hell of a cutting pass as well from Gross. No, we're talking about that.
Checked it. Obviously, they've checked it, but the fact they didn't make a show of going, we're doing a VAR check or whatever it was. And I think lost in amongst it, and obviously you described it perfectly, Adam, was lost in amongst it was how good a goal it was. This is not this is not us shithousing a goal at the end when we really needed it. This is the team have not lost. I think it's bringing Lallana and Milner on, calmed everybody down, And, they could have lost their clarity of thought. They could have started to just, throw the kitchen sink at it. And the fact that we've kept calm and we've scored a really intricate, really high quality goal from a player who normally, when he's in the 6-yard box, puts it into the, onto the railway line, has put it in the top corner. And it kind of got lost in amongst it, like how good a goal it was.
It was a stunning goal from a guy that is now. Is he still 18 or is he 19?
Who?
Pedro.
Pedro's
He's
22.
22, I think.
Yeah, I've just made up what age he is for some reason.
Yeah.
Either way, he's now the top scorer in the Europa League. 6 goals in 6 games.
Wow. What was it like in the pub?
Well, it was hard for me to hear over the bloody West Ham fans.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because they wouldn't shut up. And I'm originally from that sort of area. So hearing Irons over again was giving me PTSD. But it was... You could still get to grips with what it was like, but compared to what it would be like being there, it doesn't. There's good things about being able to watch games on TV. I feel like you could probably even say this, Robin, as good as it is in the North Stand, you probably had to have your binoculars out to see that goal go in at the end, and we could see everything perfectly. We could see the build up; it's fantastic. But
yeah, you can't get
that
the
atmosphere is
just
nothing. Right. It's not. You don't get anything.
You kind of miss because of where you are, and everything seemed to happen pretty in a linear way. Like, so from the perspective that I had, all you could really see was obviously pass, but you couldn't quite see how clever it was. And all you're thinking is like, just like, please. And yeah, so it's one of those ones you just didn't quite see it hit the back of the net.
But that's Brighton. That's the De Zerbi's Brighton at our best. That perfect. One touch, intricate play where it feels like you've done nothing's happening. You're in first gear, and then suddenly, bam, 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 the ball's in the net, and that's. I think that's probably why De Zerbi also was so happy, just because I feel like that move has been practiced over and over and over and over again in some fashion. But I mean, João Pedro, 6 goals, 6 matches. This is a guy now that Mohamed Salah, I don't know if you know about him. He's only scored 3 goals in the Europa League. Lukaku, 5 goals. Aubameyang, who obviously did absolutely nothing, 5 goals. 4 of those penalties. So he's taken the Cristiano Ronaldo route to getting the goals up. But as we know, you don't underestimate penalties in a Brighton shirt. So, no. I mean, he's just been outstanding. But let's talk about players, because there are some contenders in this game of outstanding performances. I know who mine is because it's pretty much week in, week out. But what were your thoughts?
I mean, third place is probably Igor. Because I thought, we talked about, he was so monstrous and he was just so physical down that side, and he wouldn't give up. He was just pressing. And he was one of the few that when everyone else was beginning to lag a little bit, he just seemed to still have the energy in it. Second, João Pedro. I mean, even if you take the goal out of it, he just worked so damn hard, right, for the whole game. And what was really interesting is obviously when Ferguson came on and João Pedro goes out wide, almost immediately he got the ball and cut inside and was driving towards the penalty area. So even the goal aside, like he just works so hard, even if it doesn't come off all the time, he's just, his work rate is phenomenal. And then, number one, streets ahead of anything else is Billy Gilmour. I mean, I am, again, this is probably quite revisionist, but I really am struggling to remember a central midfield performance in a Brighton shirt that was better than that.
Does everyone want to get on the Gilmour wagon with me now? So, I mean, I called him Xavi about 2 episodes ago.
No, but do you know what's interesting? It's also the first time, and I don't like that moment in the first half where he made a tackle on the edge of the box and in one motion basically sprung it into a counter attack. Was basically that. I mean, that was like Caicedo. That's the first time I've ever seen, and not with the telescopic leg that Caicedo had, but the end result where basically you stop a player in their tracks and suddenly the game is flipped, on a sixpence. But he has that range of passing. I think Stephen in the chat said he had 100% pass completion rate. Wasn't quite, we're doing him a little bit.
96.7.
97% from nearly 90 passes, I think. But I think it was something like 12 interceptions or something as well. And it's also the vast majority of the passes that he plays. I haven't looked at the stats for this, but they certainly most of them look like progressive passes. This is not just passing for passing's sake. He is the one who is spreading the ball, always looking for, not the obvious option. And he just, as I say, we talked about the goal celebration. He had nothing left in the tank by that stage. It was just phenomenal. And, amusingly, he is the player that Chelsea should have bought instead of Caicedo. Like, it's
if only there was a way for them to figure that out. Craig, was it Gilmore for you? Have you got someone else? I mean,
no, I think so. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say. I mean, I asked you a bit of it's hard. It's crazy to imagine not saying João Pedro, given the circumstances and what happened. The fact that we're still all saying Billy Gilmore says everything about his performance. What have you thought, Craig? Because there's been a few matches recently where people have come out and basically said, "Oh, if there's a mistake, we see Billy Gilmore make mistakes," and we've kind of defended that sometimes by saying, "Well, yeah, you see that because he's touching the ball 1,000 times, and you're seeing the 1% where it doesn't work out." But how good is he? How good was he on Thursday for you?
Yeah, probably the best game of his life so far, right? And he's had some very good games in the past for other teams and for us too. But yeah, it's just a pleasure to watch. I think really, a couple of nutmegs in there as well makes it a little bit sweeter too, right? Was just on it for everything. And like you said, law of averages, right? If you touch the ball 100 times and give it away once, like, people focus on the one, especially in that sort of CDM role. And all of this team makes mistakes. You can go to the Arsenal game that just happened and Bart playing a hospital pass, right? If you are
horrendous ball.
If you are in the vicinity of that and you're trying to play in this way, the mistakes are accentuated quite a lot. So it's very easy to pile on and say, right, misplaced passes here and there. But that Thursday game just clicked, right? It just, everything was coming off for him. Everything was coming up trumps. I said, just making people look silly almost. And just the way that he was able to switch defense into attack just that half second quicker meant that, we can just get rid of everything and just completely nullified them just to basically nothing, right? They sort of a lucky strike onto the bar. They did hit the post, to be fair, and I think Klaus had another opportunity at the near post, so they weren't without their chances. But Gilmore is so assured in that role, and the fact that he can get even better in that role is wild. Again, another player like Van Heck that has come on leaps and bounds from last year and is a completely different player, and we are now reliant on these players, and it just shows you this, I guess, the faith that De Zerbi puts in his players, but also the willingness to give people the chance and give people the opportunity to be and be better and act better. It was such a good performance from him. Like I said, they're few and far between when everything just clicks. So it was wonderful.
This is again a guy not that long ago that was blamed partially for Norwich going down. Thought his career was fizzling out, and now we're talking about on Brighton's highest stage we've ever been on. Being
says more
player
about,
of the game.
Says more about Norwich and how shit that team was, wasn't it?
It's not just Norwich, Chelsea, but I mean, let's not forget though, he's always been seen as a premium player for Scotland.
I mean, he was man of the match against England, wasn't he? In Euro.
Yes, he was.
What would have been 2019? Was it? Whenever it was delayed by a year. Whenever it happened.
One of the years. Yeah, no, this is a guy. There's something special about this pivot, deep line playmaker role in a Brighton shirt in this system that brings out the best of a certain type of player. And Gilmore just really, really, really perfectly fits that mold. I think he's just such a fantastic replacement for what we've had there before.
Did you see his interview at the end? I don't know if they broadcast it on. So I only watched it when I was watching the highlights.
I would have just heard "I'm Forever Blind" bubbles anyway, so I wouldn't have heard it.
They brought him over to speak, sort of on pitch interviews. They sort of brought him over to speak to Sidwell and whoever else was doing the commentary. And he sort of revealed that De Zerbi had given him a really hard time in pre-season. Had been really on him, like basically every day, being like, "You need to be better. You need to be better. You need to be better." And Steve Sidwell threw him under the bus slightly because he said, "Oh, I know that you've said to me that you went home crying a couple of times from training," and it's sort of like, cheers,
Christ.
Steve. Yeah, like that's probably a private conversation they had at some point. But what Gilmore said was like, "I'm this, and Michael Owen asked him, he was like, that can go one of two ways when someone's like that with you," and he said, "I'm the character where I just want to prove you wrong." So De Zerbi's obviously, he has done the textbook, lit a fire underneath him and smugly sat back and watched it, develop into this raging inferno. So, it's standard RDZ, genius, isn't it, really?
I'm glad you brought Michael Owen up, because I don't know if how many people that are listening have followed some of Michael Owen's just fantastic anecdotes that he's thrown out recently. And he's always been one for funny phrases and anecdotes, because he's basically just a narcissistic idiot. But he even was waxing lyrical about Brighton in the end. But if you've got a subscription, please go and read the Athletic article that Michael Cox wrote on December 15th, the day after the game. Brighton's ballers, so technically good, even Michael Owen appreciates them. And this is Michael Owen, who sort of came out the other day and said, back in the day, there were loads of great players that were absolute ballers, properly talented footballers. Now, if you can just run a bit further than everyone else and pass the ball from A to B, you can have a decent career in the Premier League. You don't even have to be that good anymore. You used to have real skill and attributes to be a top player. Now you have to be an athlete, which is funny because Michael Owen was basically just a pace merchant, which is fairly humorous. But of course, the purpose of the article was all about how Brighton is the antithesis of that stupid opinion that Michael Owen has, in that we do play in this specific way. We are proud to basically be technically gifted and not just barrage our way through games. And again, this is why we're seeing what we're seeing. Please go back and do listen to, if you haven't seen it, Michael Owen's discussion about how he was basically a brave hero for throwing an apple core into a bin in his living room in front of his mum.
The most hilarious thing I've ever seen, by the way.
Some of the memes.
I just couldn't get my head around the fact that, like, I don't know if it's still the same, but he's like, up to a certain point, he'd never watched a film in his life.
He's such a humongous tit. This is going back to obviously the well done he's 12 sort of moments and things like that of Michael Owen yesteryear. He's just a meme machine. But yeah, go back and listen to the Apple Core.
He did finish by saying Brighton are everyone's second favourite team.
Yeah, unless you're a Brighton fan, it'd be a bit weird, but yeah.
But it was. So the interview was. It was fascinating, to hear the kind of the man management that's gone on, in the background. But it was great, and De Zerbi was just, his interview. He just had nothing left. He was like, I'm drained. I think he just felt like exactly everybody else felt. They just had sort of nothing. He felt like totally wrung out. Nothing else to give. And what was quite nice was, having experienced the same in Marseille, was that their fans were kept back for like nearly 2 hours after the final whistle.
I bet probably in nicer conditions though, in the gantry there at the Amex, than probably in a pen that you were in Marseille.
In the kind of corridor that we had. But yeah, it was one of those very rare Albion occasions where, you get the kind of the fairy tale, you get the fairy tale ending.
And I don't have the stats in front of me because Twitter is completely down, because, well, obviously Elon Musk fired their entire staff. But we don't play until. Do you have that in your memory, Robert? Our next game,
7th of March.
Craig?
7th of March is the next
7th of March. Okay, so we've got a big reprieve there until we have our next game. On the docket for us, obviously coming up now, is a fairly interesting game after a drab hungover performance against Arsenal that we saw today. We now go into a game on the 21st, so at time of recording in 4 days, away to Palace, a Crystal Palace side who are fairly abject, apart from the fact that they managed to get a point against City yesterday, which nobody actually anticipated. This is a Palace side that have 17 points currently on the season. They are one above Everton, who have been docked 10 points. 3 above Forest, who are just above the drop zone. They are crap. So we're probably going to lose about 3-0 to them. Any thoughts from your side on this Palace game coming up?
I mean, it is every year we go, we owe them a battering. And, you know, it is. We may as well just declare it a 1-1 draw now and not bother playing it.
Who are we even going to play at fullback?
I'd imagine Hinchelwood and potentially Igor and Hinchelwood, or Hinchelwood and Gross. Who knows at this point? De Zerbi, for all anyone knows, may just come and fill in at right back. I don't know. But they've also got a fair number of injuries themselves. But it will be a good game. It is, I think, good for us. It is on Sky. And I will actually, on brand, I will be watching it in a Green King pub. That is not actually designed to be a segue in, but I will actually be watching it in a Green King pub.
I was not going to do this. I'd completely forgotten, and we'd have probably been told off. That's a lovely segue because, you know, it is the season for festivities and festive football. And what's the best way to watch it? Do what Robin's doing. You go down to your local Green King Sports pub. Christmas is a time to catch up with friends, old and new. So get the team to your local for refreshing pints, delicious food, and live action of every Christmas cracker. Did Josh write this? Every fixture from TNT, Sky, and Amazon is live at Green King Sport. That means wall-to-wall action on our huge HD screens. Head to your local Green King and watch every winning goal, top bins volley, and dodgy VAR decision in an atmosphere worth sharing. Also, go ahead and download the Green King Sport app, and you'll receive 10% off drinks every single time there's sport on telly, which is not too bad. Thank you for bringing that up, Robin. Josh, right. Daddy really would have told us off, wouldn't he? But what is funny in all of this, which I feel bad for Josh, for regular listeners, is he couldn't go to the game on Thursday. No, you went, Robin, and then he went to the Arsenal game today, which is why he can't record right now. Imagine that. Oh, why would you do that to yourself?
What is it? I think you had to go to his work Christmas do as well, which makes it sound even worse, doesn't it?
Which is just, God, imagine just that. You awful, miss a monumental, historic night at the Amex doing something this team and club has never done before to see, you know, Jennifer have a few too many shandies. Like, what a travesty. We talked about this before, but we get that nice 1 week break. The players actually get to enjoy Christmas. And then we have, again, I talked about this before, the game that I'm most excited about probably this entire season, the home game to Ange Postecoglou's Spurs, which has all the characteristics of being ridiculous.
A 5-5 draw, isn't it?
You're right, exactly. But as is tradition,
it'll be a 0-0 then.
Precisely. It's going to be what we don't expect.
We've done this. We've been here.
But that should be a fun one. But from our perspective, I don't know if you guys want to add any more, but we've I certainly don't want to talk any more Arsenal. We've talked a lot of Marseille. No, any other thoughts?
I mean, my one conclusion from, you know, sort of doing the business where it really matters there in Europa League is that we have a genuine chance of going far in this competition. That's my main takeaway from it. Like, there are
what have we run into Man United or Newcastle there? Oh, wait, no, never mind.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that'd be unfortunate. There are really, I mean, the teams that we fear, it's really like, it's basically Liverpool and Bayer Leverkusen are the two teams that I fear. I think Leverkusen haven't lost this season at all.
You want to avoid the smaller teams, right? We're one of the smaller teams, but you want to avoid someone that's going to sit back and have a back 11, right? You want to get your Bragas, you want to get your types of teams there where they're going to come to play, and that's when we're better.
If we're going to continue the trajectory of how ridiculous this year is, in terms of, we've seen the Albion play at the Stade Velodrome, we've seen them play at the Johan Cruyff Arena. To see the Albion play at the San Siro before it's knocked down, you know, would complete this arc of just absolute nonsense in terms of you know, how Albion history is going. But, you know, the benefit of being seeded, you know, we can't get Liverpool at this point. Interestingly, we can get Marseille again, which would be quite amusing in the last 16.
I think I'd take that.
Not having to go there again. Because it turned out USG last year, they got Union Berlin in the last 16, having both been in the same group. So yeah, Marseille, we could revisit this all again.
You've reminded me of one thing I just want to add, though, that just when we talk about depth, we talk about loans, we talk about players coming in, because we're getting into that point, right? We're going to talk about January transfers very, very, very soon. one player who is currently on the same Europa League goal tally as Mohamed Salah is a chap named Abdullah Sima for Rangers, who is also their overall top scorer at the club as a whole with 9 goals this year above James Tavernier. So, hey, I don't know whether he's going to be anything for this team. Let's not also forget that another player out on loan, Dennis Undav, just got listed as Bundesliga Player of the Month. Who knows what happens with this team? Who knows what happens with any of these players? But there's stuff is happening.
I mean, I watched for some reason, I watched West Brom against Stoke today, which was exactly how you'd imagine
Good for you.
It would be. But the one bright spot was Jeremy Sarmiento, who looked brilliant. So he's another one. I mean, do we have a recall clause on him? Who knows? It's all sorts of. I mean, what we presumably like drawing Rangers would be quite nice because presumably Seymour wouldn't be able to play.
I would love to draw Rangers regardless because they're tripe, but yeah.
But yeah, so I think, the fact that we're still going to be in Europe in March, if we kind of do this slightly, sort of, this is your life look back at, our European adventure so far, how many of us, when that draw was made, saw us winning the group? Because I'll be honest.
Not just that, Robin. How many of us thought this after the first 2 games?
Yeah, we wouldn't concede another goal as well, also. That second goal that I watched us concede after 20 minutes when Lewis Dunk made a complete hash of it, that we conceded our last European goal about 110 minutes into our European campaign. So we've reeled off 4 clean sheets with 4 wins.
We did everything we needed to do after a pretty horrendous start.
So, to win the group, even regardless of the first couple of games, and even when it came, it's absurd to have won the group with, two proper kind of giants of European football. And I say, it's not me getting carried away, but I genuinely don't see that many teams to fear in it.
Well, I'm going to quote you back on that when we get crashed out in the next game.
When we get
this is saved. This is saved. I'll keep a black books on this stuff. Let's wrap this here. I don't know when we're going to be back because this game is a Thursday game, the 21st.
Thursday night. Yeah, it's Thursday night coming.
Who knows? We then get into silly season with Christmas Eve and things like that. We'll figure out a time to record.
I guess I don't know. Friday. I don't know. Friday's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, you guys will listen. You're not going to listen on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day anyway, so we'll figure something out. If you want to hear us idiots talk.
The King's Speech, like you're going to be listening to us ahead of the King's Speech, aren't you?
But you'd rather listen to Green King's speech, I would imagine, right? So there you go. See, making up. They should give us a little bit extra for that, probably. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Robin, Craig, anything else? If not, let's say our goodbyes and appreciate everyone.
Yeah,
all good. Thanks for listening.
Cheers, guys. All right. Have a good one. Enjoy Christmas if we do not speak to you before.